For years, I continued to fight against the unicorns. General Bloodhoof was right. As I stated before, this fighting wasn't like anything I had experienced beforehand. For every push we made into their territory, they pushed us back. I saw soldiers come and go, many in caskets. Through the years, I moved up in the ranks from major to the rank of colonel. The previous colonel, Gizmo, was killed at the bloody Battle of Salmon Ridge. As I showed my might on the battlefield, and my knowledge, my name began to spread. Soon the whole Western Army knew the name Colonel Crimson. Tales spread about my feats on the battlefield. Some tales grew to mythical proportions. I heard one tale that told of me single-handedly killing 400 unicorns without getting a single scratch. While many tales ended up getting some falsehood sprinkled on them, the tales weren't unwarranted. While tales of me killing hundreds might have been exaggerated, I am a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. With all the fighting I have endured, I haven't emerged unscathed, however. My numerous battles have left me with many scars that would never fully heal. I have a long scar running down my back, one on my left foreleg, one that goes diagonally across my muzzle, and one on my neck, just to name a few. I also lost my left eye when a unicorn charged me and stabbed his horn into it. Needless to say, I look intimidating. While many of our new recruits or transfers avoid me at first, as they get used to me, they will follow me blindly into battle. I have earned their trust, and many soldiers are some of the loyal in our army, and we have a force to be reckoned with. When the general needs something done, without fail, he calls on us. I think the only thing holding up another promotion for me is that the Brigadier General Forge is still alive and fighting. In those years, we have been fighting against the unicorns. We have managed to gain most of their land. Our next conquest is the last fortress they possess before their capital city. The land they owned is now a charred husk of what it once was. It will be unusable for a short time, but when it is, it will be some of the most nutrient-rich land in the world. Tonight, we are burning the land around this fortress. We have been planning our attack while we were camped a good distance away. They can see our camp. They know we are coming. Some of them even ran when they saw us marching upon the horizon, but they were killed by their own before they made it too far beyond the walls. Tonight, both our forces will watch as the scarlet flames consume their land. The flames are starting to go out as I make my way towards the command tent. Many of the troops like to watch the fires and drink while singing songs. Not only does this help to boost troop morale, but it frightens the enemies. From captured unicorns, we've heard them talk of the songs of death that are sung during the fires that eat their lands and precede the descent of the alicorn of death, that some say come for the souls of the dead. I wave off some stallions who call me out to drink with them, telling them I'm heading for the command tent. They awe and stagger on their way. But as I near the command tent, I hear talking from within. Seems someone's arrived before me, I muttered to myself. But before I enter, I stop as I hear my name. Crimsons have been invaluable to our war efforts, General. A lesser general wouldn't have been able to do what you've done. They fail to see the larger picture and get caught up in the ethics of things. This was Brigadier General Forge's voice. Ha! But of course, that is why I am, and always will be, the greatest general the Scarlet Empire has ever seen. Things really turned around once Crimson arrived, didn't they? a lesser general would have been content on pampering him and giving him exactly what he asked for. "Sure, take a leave before a major battle," they would say, or "Sure, you can sit this one out." Whatever would keep their little soldiers loyal to them. But not I. I found his weakness, and I removed it. And we both know just how well that has worked out. General Bloodhoof was saying, "Oh, of course, sir. He has almost single-handedly driven the unicorns from these lands. He has massed the strongest fighting force behind him and strikes down his foes without mercy. And to think, all we had to do was get one of the Emperor's elite guards to hire some unicorns to kill his wife and burn down his home. And that story about the unicorns that had been attacking villages within the Empire? Brilliant, sir." Forge was commending the general. "Yes, of course I hadn't planned on Crimson killing them. They were our soldiers, after all. If only he had arrived a little bit later than he did. But no matter. Crimson's newfound drive more than makes up for their loss. He has taken us from barely holding our own to knocking on the capital's door soon enough. All thanks to his wife being brutally murdered by the savage unicorns," the general said. They continued talking, but I was no longer listening to what they were saying. The unicorns that had killed my wife, my foal, and burned down my house were soldiers in our army. And what's more, they were ordered by the very general whom I had placed my utmost trust and faith in? I couldn't believe it. I had killed thousands of unicorns, thinking that I was avenging my wife and foal. I had killed, murdered, mares and foals in addition to the soldiers. In my eyes, every unicorn who wasn't in the Scarlet Empire was my enemy, and I had killed them without hesitation. But now, I killed them for what? They weren't the ones who had killed my family. I know that now. I stepped away from the command tent and began to wander back towards my own. As I did so, I looked at my hooves. The hooves that had wrongly killed thousands. Sure, they were my enemies, but I killed them for the wrong reason. Not because I was ordered to, because they were going to kill me, or anything like that. I killed them because I had been fooled into thinking they wronged me, personally. But they didn't. It wasn't them, but my own superior, General Bloodhoof. When I finally reached my tent, my rage was boiling over. I was no longer in shock, and my anger was pouring out. I bucked over my table, scattered my scrolls, and knocked my armor into the dirt. As I did this, my rage began to subside, and I calmed down. I was still angry, hateful, but I had to calm down and think. If the general did this to me, surely he could have done, or will do, similar things to others. I couldn't let this go unpunished, and surely I wasn't going to let him continue to do this. But I have no proof. I know. I heard them. But Forge can just back up the general, and who else knows who is in on this? If I just accuse him of this, it'll be played off as slander. No, I can't use words. This is the only one thing the general will understand. One thing that will beat him, and that is force. For the rest of the night, and into the hours of the morning, I set about making plans to take down the general. When I didn't show up for the meeting, a messenger was sent to me, but I waved him away, saying that I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't interrupted after that, and I formulated a plan. I couldn't just take the general on myself. He wouldn't allow it. I also didn't know exactly who he has under his hoof, but I know who I can trust. My plan was simple. Gain support, assassinate Bloodhoof, and execute Forge. From there, I would take over as general. A simple coup d'etat. Any who opposed me afterwards would be executed like Forge. First things first, I need support. After the meeting of the officers had finished, I went around to the ones that I knew I could trust. Most were under my command, but others weren't too keen on the general. Major Snow, Captains Blade and Mint, Lieutenant Lance, and Sergeant Autumn. They all agreed to help me and spread the word to the troops under their command. Our total force was only about a third of the entire Western Army, but it would suffice. I relayed the plans and made sure everyone knew their place and what had to be done. Once everything was prepared, I slept for a few hours. I needed to be sharp and ready for what was going to happen later that morning. When I awoke, I picked my armor up off the ground and cleaned it off before putting it on. I made sure everything was in place properly and that my sword was fastened securely. Once I was ready, I stepped outside of my tent. The strategic meeting was about to begin, and the general was taking the stage. I was at the back of the crowd of soldiers gathered before him. I was looking around and making sure everyone was in their place, when Captain Mint came up to me and whispered, "My troops are aligning the center of the crowd, as you instructed. When you give the signal, they will give you a straight shot to the stage and hold every pony back." I nodded to him and returned to his usual place. It was time to begin. The general cleared his throat and began. "Let's get down to business, shall we?" Before I interrupted him. "Yes, General, let's get down to it, shall we?" As I said this, Captain Mint's troops created a path to the stage and made sure the others stood in place. The other officers had troops placed around the outsides to make sure no pony tried anything. The general narrowed his eyes before saying, "What is this, Crimson?" I began to walk down the path made for me in the crowd. As I did so, I spoke. "You, of all ponies, General, should know the answer to that. I know what you have done, General. I heard you talking about it last night." The general didn't seem fazed, but said, "And what is it you are talking about?" I looked around at me before saying, "I know what you did to my family." Some ponies in the crowd started muttering, "I know that you've been lying to me. I know the truth." He narrowed his eyes further and asked, "Do you know what you are saying? Just what are you intending to do?" I smiled as I reached halfway through the crowd and said, "I'm going to avenge them." I stopped walking and drew my sword before charging the stage. As I drew, so did the soldiers who were on my side. When I reached 3/4 of the way through the crowd, the general commanded, "Kill the traitors!" Some in the crowd drew their weapons and started fighting with the soldiers, keeping them in. Others were unsure of whom to follow and looked around, panicked. But I kept charging the stage. When I was a few feet from it, I jumped into the air and landed on its edge, just a few feet away from the general. I pulled back my sword, and I continued my charge and prepared myself to pierce his chest. But when I was just inches away, I felt intense pain hit my sides. I thrust my blade forward, however. It fell just short of reaching the general. I stared at him, with hatred in my eyes, before I turned to look at my sides. 4 stallions had managed to get to the stage with halberds and aimed for the gaps in my armor. All 4 had hit their marks, and they were slowly backing away, wide-eyed, as their weapons stuck out of me, 2 in each side. I looked back at the general as I coughed up some blood. He was staring at me, shocked. Slowly, I took a step closer to him, and then another, before bending my neck and picking up my fallen sword. I could still kill him. I just needed my sword. As I bent my neck, I coughed up more blood, and my vision started to get blurry. My body quickly began to lose its strength, and I couldn't move my legs or neck anymore. I was still standing with my neck bent, but I couldn't move another inch. I heard the fighting around me fading, as the general seemed to regain his composure, and he drew his sword. "Nice try, Crimson, but not even you can lay a hoof on me. All of you listen. You know my thoughts on treason. No matter your rank, you will get what you deserve. I will spare you all a prolonged execution and slay Crimson right here. In fact, I know many of you were fooled into this by him, so I will spare your lives. This time. Now, Crimson, despite everything you have done for the Scarlet Empire, you will pay for your traitorous ways. Goodbye." At those words, he raised his sword above my neck. So, this was it. This was how I was going to die. I wouldn't be able to see my family in whatever afterlife there was. Not with all the things that I've done. But in a way, I deserve this. I should have realized sooner. And this is my punishment. I closed my eye as I prepared for the strike. As I watched the events play out, I suddenly got a strong feeling. It wasn't the feeling that told me that I have a new soul to collect. It was something else. It couldn't be, I said aloud. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it had to be. I had witnessed this stallion's entire life. It had to be him. I opened a portal and prepared for the jump. The general swung his sword downward, and I prepared for the impact of the blade upon my neck. But it didn't come. Gasps and screams came from the crowd, and I opened my eye. I wasn't dead. What happened? As I turned my head, I noticed a curved blade on the right side of my neck, encased in magical energy. When I turned to the left, I saw a figure standing in a black cloak, whose legs were skeletal up to the thigh. What's going on? I heard the general drop his sword, which had been stopped by this unknown weapon around my neck. What the hell are you?" he shouted. The mysterious figure levitated the weapon from around my neck, before addressing the general. "General Bloodhoof, correct?" As the figure spoke, I felt the halberds begin removed from my side, and I collapsed to the ground. They were surrounded by magic, the same color as the scythe? I could feel my strength slowly return, but I could only manage to move my neck and look around. The general was backing away, slowly, wide-eyed. He stiffly nodded at the cloaked figure. "Good. You should know what? Who I am," it said. Are you here for me?" the general asked shakily. The figure seemed to laugh at this before saying, "You? No. But I will see you again. Soon. I have business with this one, Crimson, you call him." It motioned towards me. The figure approached me before getting down to my level, and then used its magic to pull back its hood. Its face was missing from its muzzle, leaving only bone exposed. It had a unicorn's horn, but wings, too? I felt myself growing pale. "The alicorn of death," I whispered to myself. It smiled, before saying, Very good. This is somewhat new for me. I don't usually transport whole ponies back with me, let alone ones that are still alive. You might feel some discomfort. Before I could say anything, it wrapped me in magic and hauled me onto its back. It then swung its scythe, and the air itself seemed to split apart, and darkness began to leak from the cut. It turned back to the general and the crowd of onlookers and said, "I'll see you all later," before jumping into the darkness. When I next regained consciousness, I was lying on a bed of what appeared to be a bedroom of a normal house. Was I dreaming? Did all that just happen? I was about to dismiss the whole ordeal as a dream until I saw the alicorn standing beside my bed. I sat up with a shock. "What's going on?" I asked. "Calm down, Crimson. Everything's fine. I'm Death," he told me. "Is that supposed to make me relax? Am I dead, or what?" I asked him. "Yes and no. Technically you're dead," he said. "But you saved me from dying, didn't you?" I asked, confused. Sort of. I saved you from being decapitated, but it was your time to die. So you are technically dead. I just wasn't sure if losing your head would have any negative effects on our work. So I saved you, brought you back here, and let you bleed to death," he informed me. "You let me bleed to death? What the fuck is wrong with you? Who does that? And if I died, how are we talking right now?" I questioned him. Well, you see, damn. I really wish those disembodied voices were here to help me explain this. I haven't seen them in years, though," he rambled. "What does that even mean? Do you even know what's going on?" I asked him. "Hey, come on now, give me a break. This is, first for me. Let me explain what happened to me first, I suppose," he said. And he told me everything. Everything he knew. How he was alive, died, and brought back to perform the duties of death, and that 3 others would eventually accompany him on this endeavor. It was a lot to take in. So, in short, when I saw you about to die, I got this feeling, and decided that, hey, this stallion must be war. And that brings us to here. Any further questions?" he finished up. "Yeah, my wound's healed up, but you're still missing muscle and skin. What's the deal with that?" I asked. "Ah," the voice told me about that. "When we become immortal, all of our wounds heal. However, that which isn't there can't be healed. Since my muscle and skin was dissolved in acid, it couldn't be healed. But the stab wounds you received could be healed since you had all your skin still there. Oh, but it doesn't heal everything, which is why you still have numerous scars and are still missing your eye," he told me. That makes sense. Somehow. "Okay, so why did you grow wings and I did not?" I asked him. "I'm wondering that as well. Perhaps it has something to do with magic, and maybe it was first come, first serve. I'm not sure. Becoming what you are makes us stronger. You should notice a large difference in your strength. Perhaps your physical strength is even greater than mine is. We can test that stuff out later," he said. "Okay. One last question. What exactly is my job? Do I just guide souls like you do?" I asked. "I'm really glad you asked. Well, War, and I do hope you don't mind me calling you that, War. As War, you will guide the souls of those who die in battle. But not only that, you guide the souls of those who die violently, excluding things like earthquakes. Violently as in strong feelings involved, like deaths from suicides, assaults, murder, etc. I handle everything else. I used to do your job, before you got here, that is," he replied. "I see. So, I only deal in a small portion of the deaths then, huh?" I said. "Yeah. But at least now we can have fun doing it together. One more thing," he said. A halberd materialized out of nowhere. "This is your weapon. Look familiar? It is just like the halberds that killed you. Of course, this one's infused with magical properties to make it stronger. And, like my scythe, if you think of a portal and slice the air with it, it'll create a portal back to our dimension, outside of time. Lastly, to summon it, just imagine you are unsheathing a sword or something. To make it disappear, sheath a sword. Simple as that," he said. "Now then, let's get to work, shall we?" And so I became the Apocalypse Pony of War. I didn't quite understand what that meant back then, but my fate became tied to the other three. And now it's time for the third to tell her tale.